Here we are, site 426, and it is my birthday. We are camping overnight here tonight. This site is really good. One of my favorites here. It's nice and shady if it was sunny. It's a little bit cloudy today. Has a nice little spot for a little tent there. We have our tent, and then also there, so it's very big. I would have probably put the dining tent there if we'd done dining, but we're only here for the one night. Just came because it's pretty close to everybody's workplaces, and yeah, so you've seen us at Bronte before, and tomorrow night we're going on a ghost walk. Tonight we get to have our campfire. Life hack. Somebody came to visit me from a galaxy far, far away. There you go. It's not going to shock you. It's not going to shock you. Don't. We're here tonight, going on a ghost walk. Spooky. There he is again. It's like he's a ghost.
I don't think I introduced myself. I'm sorry. It's been a long weekend. My name's Adrian. I'm a historian. As I mentioned earlier, I'm the assistant curator at the St. Catharines Museum, and I used to work here. For one summer, I was backfilling for somebody, and 9 years ago is when we started doing the ghost walks. So you have one of the original ghost walk people tonight. So the idea behind the ghosts or energy in the house, depending on how you describe what's going on in the house, Steve and the investigators in their report said that there's no negative energy in the house as far as we know, and there's no actual sort of intelligence of a ghost. So no actual person is a ghost. But if you look at the history of the house, it's kind of interesting to give an explanation about what's going on. So the house was built in 1899, so it's a late Victorian farmhouse. It's a wonderful example of late Victorian architecture, especially in rural Ontario. And a really good example of this is one story about the hair wreath. There is a hair wreath on the inside of the house. The first thing you'll see on your right-hand side when we walk in today is a hair wreath. It's about this big in a glass-fronted frame. And I want to say about 10 years ago, maybe the summer before I started, or maybe a couple before, I can't remember, but Andrew and Kathy were going to fix the hair wreath because there was a hole in the glass. It was broken in the corner. So they took the hair wreath. The place was closed, obviously. We try not to do repairs and curation work while the house is open. So the house is closed. Nobody's in the house except for them. They're taking the hair wreath off the wall, and they hear a door slam and footsteps running down the hall upstairs. So they put the hair wreath back on the wall and left it at that. So definitely, perhaps there's an energy associated with the hair wreath. I mean, hair wreaths are really interesting anyway because when you brush out your hair, you have all that hair left over. And so if you're Victorian, what do you do with that hair? Of course, rich Victorian women have all the time in the world, and so they're going to collect everybody's hair and weave it into a nice wreath to show off how much time they have to sit around doing that kind of activity. So that's one of the many legacies of the Victorian period that we're so graced with today. So with that, I want to play 2 recordings of the first investigation 9 years ago, probably in August. I honestly can't remember. And the first one, it's very loud, so let me just, I'm going to play with the sound a little bit first. Kind of hear that sound. That's from the front parlor, and during their investigation they really got the strong feeling of children in the front parlor. I was sitting there on the ground with them. I didn't really feel very much, or anything, but they got children, which is really interesting because when we give a tour of the house, we talk about how the front parlor was really closed and locked most of the time, so children actually shouldn't be in there unless it's their birthday or Christmas or something like that, some special event. So it's interesting that there's a strong feeling of children in a room where they're not supposed to be. So that's kind of cool. That may reveal something about the house, or maybe some of the furniture in the room. So the second electronic voice phenomenon recording is this one, and this is loud too. So it's loud.
This is beauty Victorian. It doesn't have to go together.
Yeah, I guess.
So there's 2 sounds there. So there's the cough, and then there's sort of the closing of the door, the wood slapping each other. So basically, in that recording, all of us were in the dining room, and this was in the front parlor. And they left the recorder in the front parlor, and we were in the other room. And so you can hear us talking in the other room, and then the cough happens. And then there's these little flip boards in each room to tell you something interesting about the house, and they're little just like wooden picture frames on hinges. And so when you do that, when you like move it and it bumps against the wall, that's the sound that it makes. So I'll play it again.
Decorating a little bit right now.
That's the beauty Victorian.
So we didn't hear that.
It doesn't have to go
So then we
together.
went and listened to, because I think around here,
That one's the only one I didn't hear.
That was more upstairs. It wasn't no.
so they did, somebody heard something, and then that led us to the recording, and there it is. So the family would get up to in this room. So we have a pump organ at the back. There's a bookshelf, a desk for doing accounts or letters or postcards, all sorts of things. So yeah, a really interesting room, and this as visitors we probably wouldn't see. As family members, definitely. But if this is the room that you use all the time, it's probably not the tidiest all the time, ready for visitors. Of course, there's no phones or cell phones or anything. So if you're visiting, you show up. Sometimes unannounced, especially if you're a neighbor. And so you've got to have a room ready for somebody to visit. So that's really the idea behind the sort of division of rooms. The Victorians would hate open concept homes that we have today. I don't like it either. It has to be clean all the time. So then it's like, you need a room that you can be messy in, and then a room that you can be clean in. So there you go. Anyway, so what's really interesting is that, as I mentioned before, the paranormal investigators got really strong senses of children in this room. And their children aren't supposed to be in that room. Even when there's visitors, usually, you sort of have to be a little bit older to be included in tea time or something like that. But there are a few exceptions. Does anybody know what some exceptions might be to being allowed in the front parlor? Christmas, yeah. Birthdays, absolutely, for sure. Funerals, yeah. Funerals is another one. And it's kind of unfortunate, but the word parlor was, sort of replaced at the end of the Victorian period into sort of after the First World War with the words living room, because the parlor was so associated with funerals that nobody wanted to spend time in parlor. Because this is sort of what you imagine, right? When you think about a parlor, it's like, somebody's old room, dark, musty. We had the family had a home child. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the home child program, but orphans at the turn of the century, orphans from England were sent to Canada to different farming families because there was an orphanage, orphanages were at capacity, an orphan almost crisis basically. It's kind of a controversial program by today's standards, but generally on the whole they lived happy lives. And Dolly was the home child that lived here, and she was actually married at the house. Additionally, Henry and Margaret, it's hot. I'm 1 minute. I'm just dying too. If you're dying, I'm dying. So they also had 3 children, but at the time of that, so here we go back to our children thing. So really the only child was Dolly in this house, because by the time this house was built, the children were in their teens. The oldest, Christina, was married on the front porch, actually. Her wedding was on the front porch. I forget, but just before the First World War, 1908, 1909. So they're teenagers when this particular house was built. So again, children in the parlor. I'm still weird, but you heard that little girl's, little giggle there on the recording, so who am I to say? Anyway, definitely you need more space for bigger special events, Christmas, birthdays, and funerals. And these lovely pocket doors open, not every Victorian house had these, but these lovely pocket doors open, so you've got a much larger space to host. You guys are 25-ish. You can host, another maybe 10, 35, 40 people in this space. The heat is our tin ceiling. And the ceiling, it really insulates the room and reflects the heat back down. And the idea is behind that to help you show off, if your guests are warm, it means you can afford to heat the house. If your guests are cold, then you're poor. You have a nice house, but you can't afford to heat it. So that's the idea of having the radiators on the outsides of the walls so that you can say, look at my radiators. And most of them are painted with really fancy work on them. It's really about showing off. A big part of Victorian life was, especially after Albert died, Prince Albert, by the way, I'm speaking about Prince Albert, Victoria's husband. I just assume you're all familiar with royal history. Prince Albert died in 1850 something. Anybody know? 1850s, let's say. So after that, really, as I was talking about Victoria's mourning period, a sort of a wave of spiritualism came about in the second half of the 1800s. And that's really based on a couple of different things. Charles Dickens was a super, super popular writer, and before his works were published and written in books, he was writing in the newspapers. And he was writing a lot of ghost stories. In fact, his most famous Christmas Carol has 3 very famous ghosts. So ghosts are a big part of the culture at the time. So you know how we have vampires and we have wizards? Well, they had ghosts. All over the place. So spiritualism is the belief that you can communicate with spirits or people who have died, whether they're ghosts or whether they're sort of on the other side. And one way that you can do that is by having a seance. And a seance is it's really interesting. It can be spooky. You can use the Ouija board, which was invented in 1890. And the idea behind that is sort of democratizing the spiritualism activities like a seance. Before you'd have to go to a fortune teller or a seance person, or have someone come in, have a medium come in and be the channel which communicated it. But this is supposed to say, everybody can get one, and you can do it after dinner in your own house, and you don't need a medium anymore. And the idea was that mediums, are we believing them? Are we not? Are they tricking us? And there's tons of evidence for lots of trickery going on. And if you think about it, Victorians, I mentioned before, they aren't, I don't like the word stupid, they aren't stupid. The huge one over there, we know that the sort of, the extension was done in the 70s when the park was opened, as well as they replaced one of the walls with a nice 70s brick wall. So we do know that there's some reconstruction going on. We're not sure, maybe that part of that barn was brought from another property. It's hard to tell. They didn't write. They made lots of suggestions in the management plan, but they didn't really write down what they did. So we sort of rely on a couple different stories here and there. But this barn, we do know, is original to the property and was here before the house. So we're standing in like the oldest piece on the property, really. 1880, most likely. So they were farming here for quite a while before they were able to build the beautiful brick Victorian house. So this is probably the barn that the kids grew up with. And it would have housed probably 5 horses, 2 teams of workhorses, of 2 workhorses, and then a quarter horse for transportation or light work, something like that. So horses were super important on farms all the way up until the Second World War, really, because farm machinery was either too expensive after the First World War and also not really reliable as much. So you could probably have a tractor, but you'd also still need a horse or 2. So you can imagine the whole life of the farm is run around the lives of these animals. So they're pretty important animals. And then if you associate all of the stuff that we've already heard about Victorians with spirits and all that kind of thing, you can definitely translate that onto animals, and especially horses. There's lots and lots and lots of stories about ghost horses and other ghost animals. And there are a couple that go along with the last workhorse that was here at the park, which died in 2005. Originally, the park was meant to operate as heritage as possible. So the idea is horses pulling machinery all the way up. They were working all the way up until about 2000, when sort of this management of the park system changed a little bit, and so did the budgets. And I'm a volunteer, so I can say that. So if you want to see horses, you gotta, people gotta support budgets. Okay, so that's as political as I'll get tonight. Anyway, so the last horse, I forget his name, but he died in 2005 in this paddock. He was a bit of an older guy, and we didn't have any horses after that. And having horses, honestly, is expensive. And my grandparents had horses, and my grandma used to say, you have to be crazy to have horses. So if you know anybody, you have to be crazy. That they become your life. So that would require a huge amount of money to sort of start the horse program up again. We didn't have horses again until 2014. We host a couple of ponies or horses from a rescue group that's local. I think they're in Guelph. And so we've had race horses. We've had these 2 ponies for this year and last year. But between 2005 and 2014, we didn't have any horses. And all the time, we get dog walkers and people running. It's a nice, really quiet part of the park, especially in the morning. Nobody's really down here compared to the children's farm, which is wild most of the time. So it's a nice, quiet place to go for a walk, and all the time. We'd say, we get stories, we're so happy to see horses back at the farm. We heard your horse died, and we're really happy to see a horse in the paddock again. And we're like, okay, well, that's weird because we don't have horses. So there are no horses in the park. But I saw a horse. I was walking my dog the other day, and I saw a horse in the paddock, and I just wanted to say I'm really happy to see you have horses again. I really like seeing the horses. I'm sorry, we don't have horses. Yeah. So these are like regular people who visit all the time, who, when you say that to them, they're like, no, you have a horse. Show me where the horse is, because they saw a horse. So, whether it was a ghost of the last horse, a ghost of one of the Brecken's horses, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it was a ghost or if it was an energy, or if it was just, those people love that place so much, just like all the staff and the volunteers, and I'm sure most of you love the house so much, people feel something, whether they see something or feel something. So I'll leave it at that tonight. Thank you so much for joining us on our ghost walk of Spruce Lane Farm.
Spooky ghost tour, we decided to come down to Hamilton Adventure Park. We are going to do some mini-putt. Maybe do some batting cages.
Yeah. Dun 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 dun.